Hey there, everybody. Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of What's Hot with Sea of Tranquility. We're normally reviewing albums, but we also occasionally talk about books. And, if we're going to talk about the brand new Geezer Butler autobiography, got to bring Mr. Chris Allo on board, right? So, Into the Void, From Birth to Black Sabbath and Beyond by Geezer Butler. Welcome, Chris. How you doing?
Doing good, Pete. Doing good. Thanks for having me. Always a absolute pleasure to talk Sabbath with you. My favorite
Yeah.
topic.
Absolutely. And Chris and I just got off a very long Hudson Valley Squares taping, and it's actually Monday night when we're taping this. So it's also Geezer Butler's birthday. So we're both a little low on energy right now. That's the reason being it's pretty late. But yeah, so obviously we've had, an Ozzy book. Tony wrote his book. Now we got Geezer's book. Will Bill Ward's book be too far off? Who knows?
Well, I actually heard Eddie Trunk interviewed Geezer Butler on his show on Sirius XM about a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago,
Yeah.
and I was shocked because I have heard through the grapevine. I don't want to name sources, but I've heard through the grapevine that Bill Ward is not in the best of health. Hopefully, that's not entirely the case, but Geezer did say that Bill Ward is now currently writing a book. So hopefully we will see that sooner rather than later. And yeah, he would be the last of the original four guys to come out with it.
And arguably the guy who probably has the craziest stories to tell, right? Arguably.
Yeah, could be for sure. In fact, and I'm sure we'll get into it. I jotted notes down on a bunch of stuff, but man, Bill, I always knew Bill Ward was a partier, but Geezer Butler kind of paints Bill in like, wow, he was, I always thought Ozzy was up here and, Bill was somewhere down here. But after reading, Geezer's book with the amount of partying that Bill Ward was doing, it sounds like he's just a smidge under Ozzy.
Yeah, I got the impression from reading this that Bill was lucky to make it out of the 80s, big time, right? Even the 70s, you could arguably say. I mean, he yeah. Let's kind of back up a little bit. This book is set up the way a lot of these rock autobiographies are set up. The book starts, they talk about growing up as kids and blah blah blah. I don't know about you, but I've read a ton of these type of books. I almost don't care about that shit anymore. I just want to talk about your time in the band and all those stories and making the albums. And it's all fine and dandy hearing about growing up and wherever, but I to the point, I'm just like, it's like you have to wait till like page 50 for all the really good stuff to start, right?
I
And
could not agree more. That is it to a T, 100%.
Yeah, it's like, because after a while it's like it doesn't matter who it is, whether it's
all the same.
Geezer or Tony or Lemmy or Paul McCartney or Pete Townsend or whoever it is, all the kid stories are all the same.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I just don't care anymore. It's like, to me, it's just like, can we please get to the important stuff? And the important stuff is when you became a musician and maybe the early bands you were in, and then when you joined the big band. And that's we want to hear all this stuff. I appreciate from this book a couple things. I think we always kind of thought that Geezer was kind of the quiet guy in the band. So I like the fact that we're hearing from him personally. He's got some crazy stories to tell. And I get the impression that he was brutally honest with a lot of stuff that goes into this book, maybe to the point that it doesn't paint some of his comrades in the band too well at times. Would you agree with that a little bit?
100%. Yeah, Geezer is definitely the soft-spoken guy who stayed out of the limelight. I was able to interview Geezer Butler 3 or 4 times, and yeah, he definitely sort of always seemed like he was holding back or held back. But you're right, Pete. He came out all guns blazing this time.
I get the impression he had a chip on his shoulder for many years. Because
After reading this book, 100%. Yeah.
He talks about being fucked over by the band on numerous occasions. And yes, I always thought that him and Tony were like this. And maybe they are, but you get done reading this book, you're like, he doesn't say some nice things about Mr. Iommi at times.
Yes. I mean, and he flips back and forth. There was definitely times when he gives Tony his cookies, so to speak. He says, listen, Tony was the musical force behind the band. Tony was the most talented. He was the most driven. He was the leader of the group. He was the heavy hand or the tough guy of the group.
Yeah.
But yes, at the same time, you are right. Geezer mentions several times, like with the name issue, like Geezer felt, and he could be right that he does not own any piece of the Black Sabbath name. He
Right.
kind of felt like Tony owes him a piece. There was several instances, and I thought the same thing, where he was definitely complimentary towards Tony, and definitely a few times where it was like, he was not so he wasn't holding back towards Tony.
Yeah.
And he made no bones about shitting all over Tony when he did Sabbath without Geezer.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And the drug issues and everything like that, and he definitely points at Tony as being the guy who, hey, we all did lots of blow and all sorts of other stuff, but Tony was the guy who continued on and had the biggest problem. And but he talks a lot about the women in his life, and mainly he talks a lot about the two main ones, and now the love of his life that he's been with for quite a while. He talks a lot about his veganism, right? And how he basically just at some point in time, he just basically stopped with the drugs and tried to cut alcohol as much as possible. But he stopped eating meat like way back when. Like, imagine how tough that was back in the 70s to be a vegetarian out on the road, right?
Way early on, and his stories of like being a vegan or a vegetarian way back
potatoes and nothing else.
Like, right? Like he could eat a potato once a night and that was it. Like that, he could eat nothing. It was just horrific, some of those stories.
Yeah.
Mentioning the wife, I did learn quite a few things. I mean, I know a good amount about Sabbath, but what I love, I learned quite a few things. One, I don't remember this as much. I wanted to reread the Tony Iommi book, but it definitely seemed like it was either Ozzy or Bill that was either pissing, shitting, or puking on something like all the time. And he's, they're the hygiene on both guys apparently was awful.
Yeah.
And that's how Geezer met his second wife. He said Bill Ward stunk so bad he refused to stay on the tour bus with him, so he was flying to the Sabbath gigs, and that's how he met his future wife Gloria at an airport.
Yep. Yeah, that was pretty funny actually. He's talking about how bad Bill stunk. Like he wouldn't shower for like days on end, and he would have like Lord knows what all over his clothes and in his hair, and he would just his breath was terrible, and just I can't imagine being in close quarters like that. And then the stories of Ozzy going to hotels and shitting in the ice machines.
Yes. Oh, just some disgusting stuff. Just like really like, wow, dude, you were fucked up. Like if this stuff is true, which it could be, that's another thing too, Pete. I always think, wow, we're reading a book about all this clarity that this person now has in his 70s when he's recanting these stories from 50 years ago. But in the same breath, you're telling us about all the fucking drugs and alcohol you did. Like, Pete, I'm sure there's plenty of drunken nights I don't remember. And I know you've got the same, but yet these guys seem to
remember everything.
All these details.
Yeah.
And you are 100% right. I think Geezer didn't hold back. And I know I read an interview before this book was released, and Geezer said the public, my one criticism of the book is it's pretty short.
Yeah. It's like 275, I think, something like that.
271.
Yeah.
And Geezer Butler had said in an interview before the book was released that his publisher, and I can't remember the exact number, but the publisher made Geezer cut, or they cut it for him, it was either 50 or 75 pages, because there was all this stuff that the publishers felt they could get sued over.
Yeah.
So I am sure that's all stuff again that Geezer did not hold back, and that ties into the other thing as far as the book length. I was fairly disappointed that the book goes. Yeah, there's some good pictures of Geezer as a youngster and some of the Sabbath lineups, but I was disappointed that page 1 to 167 goes from Geezer's birth in, I think it's 1949 till 1978, and page 167 to 271, which is 100 pages, give or take, covers 1979 to 2023. So, I mean, he covers the Ozzy, very rushed, covers the Ozzy era, his childhood and the Ozzy era in depth, and then, does a fairly good job of the Dio era, then a little bit on the Born Again, and just fucking zooms to the finish line.
Yeah. Even like the Live Aid it's a couple pages, if that.
I don't even think exactly. I think it's a couple paragraphs. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not much. I got the impression that the whole book really, to me, felt very rushed. It's just everything is kind of glossed over. I would have liked a little bit more in-depth information about what went on with the creation of some of the albums. Because, I mean, here's the guy who wrote most of the lyrics early on.
Yes.
He kind of touches on it a little bit, but he doesn't spend a lot of time on it. That was kind of disappointing. And not that I'm the hugest fan, but, he doesn't really talk about his solo albums much at all. That's just...
And I thought I agree. I not only found that very interesting, but, part of me thought, and, I am a very big Sabbath fan, but, listen, if I had to pick one guy in Sabbath, my guy's Tony Iommi.
Yeah.
I almost wondered if it was like a little sour grapes at Tony with the Sabbath thing when he carried on, because, when you read the book, Geezer talks about all these aborted bands that he did, bands he started that played live. He recorded a whole album in the 80s with one of his solo bands. I mean, hell, he just did a band with, where was it? In the, summer of, where was it? Yeah, okay, here we go. So he had a band in 1986, recorded an album's worth of songs that never got released. The two or three Geezer Butler, GZR records really didn't do great. He had the Geezer Butler band. I have a tape of them from the Marquee in London in, I think, 1985. That fell apart. And he had a band, what was it called? Deadland Ritual?
Something like that.
That did it was Geezer Butler, Steve Stevens, and what's his name from Guns N' Roses on drums?
Matt Sorum, yeah, that was
Matt Sorum. And they supposedly did a record, and they did tour Europe before, and now that fell apart.
Yep.
So it was interesting that he did have a bunch of other projects, and just went nowhere. And obviously, of the four original members, right, nobody can touch Ozzy's success, but Tony would certainly be the guy that had the second most success of the band. I thought it was interesting, and there was only a little blurb on it, but Geezer said he was fired by Sabbath in 1977.
Yep.
I had never heard that before.
Nope.
I thought it was really interesting how he mentioned that Don Arden had become the Sabbath manager again, which I knew, but then he had sold the management contract to Sandy Pearlman, and that's how Sandy Pearlman managed Sabbath, because Don Arden refused to work with them because they had picked Ronnie James Dio to be the vocalist.
Right. Yep.
Couple of little things I thought was interesting. I did think it's very interesting, and I don't know how you feel about it, Pete, but I think it's kind of weird that Geezer is really pushing the narrative that he invented the devil horns.
Yep.
Listen, I think Ronnie James Dio had the best answer to it, because he was like, no, I didn't invent it. I got it from my Italian grandmother.
Right.
I mean, listen, Pete, you're Italian. I remember I had aunts and uncles that had walked around with this on either their necklace their gold necklace, or the ladies had it on a gold charm bracelet
My
in
grandfather
the
used to do all.
70s.
My grandfather used to do it all the time. When he waved, he would wave
A
like.
hundred percent. 100%. So listen, there's the picture of Geezer Butler flashing the devil horns in 1971. Did Geezer Butler invent it? No. But he says he told Ronnie to do it. Uh, okay, is that believable? Maybe, but Ronnie
Why
did it.
wasn't Geezer doing it all throughout the 70s then, right?
100%. Right. If it was such a cool thing to do, why didn't? Because guess who did it every fucking night, over and over again, and had the audience give it back to him every night, was Ronnie James Dio. And not for nothing, Pete, you know it. I don't have to pull it out, because it's in Live Evil. If I'm not mistaken, only for the Dio era of Sabbath, they put this on the merchandising. It was on the T-shirts and the posters and the buttons and the patches. And when Ronnie left, I don't remember seeing that anymore on Sabbath merchandise.
Nope.
So listen, even if Geezer did do it, it's just kind of weird that he
Bring it up.
really wants to take credit for it. I'm like, all right, dude, I thought that was kind of weird.
Yeah. I don't know, but it was an entertaining book. I mean, it's a quick read, and like you said, there are some things in there that I was kind of surprised to hear that I'd never heard before. A lot of it is stuff that you probably already know, but I think if you're a Sabbath fan, you got to read it, right? I mean, that's
for sure. And I think I learned more in this book about Black Sabbath than I did from the Tony book. I think Tony kind of went through things with a little bit more rose-colored glasses. And yeah, as you mentioned, I think Geezer Butler kind of took the gloves off. Even with the stuff with Ronnie, where he was saying how Ronnie was complaining about the royalties, and he wanted money from the publishing from the Ozzy songs that I guess were on Live Evil, and just all sorts of really interesting stuff. And there was the part about Ronnie complaining about, was it lemons or grapefruits it just a lot of interesting, even on the Heaven and Hell tour. I thought it was fascinating where it said Robert Plant and John Bonham went to go see Sabbath at the Hammersmith Odeon, and John Bonham was wasted and came in the back in the dressing room and said, "Well, what's with this midget? Where's Ozzy?" Just some really interesting stories.
And another crazy thing, which I thought, so he touches on the whole Live Evil situation, and the talk about the claims of Ronnie and Vinny coming in and messing with the stuff, and in the reissue that just came out of Live Evil, they talk in there how now everybody is in agreement that all the rumors of what was going on actually didn't happen, but yet in this book he talks again about what was talked about 40 years ago.
Yes.
So it's like, get your what is the story?
Get the story straight. Right. Which is it? I completely agree. The only thing I thought of is that maybe he was working on this book for a number of years, and that, I don't know, maybe somebody didn't go back and fix that, or I mean, who knows? Maybe that's just the story they want to say now, that, oh yeah, no, that guy was lying to all of us. I mean, like I always say, since we're talking Sabbath, like Cozy Powell falling off the tree, off a horse and breaking his hip, and that's why he had did that really happen, or was it just him and Ronnie weren't getting along? Who knows what the truth is? The one thing I found really fascinating, which I had never known, was why Geezer was out after Born Again. And it said his father got sick and died, and then he had to go to England, and when he came home, his son was gravely ill, and they did not think his son was going to survive.
Yeah, his young son, right? He was really young. Yeah.
Really young. And so he was, whoever, I don't remember, maybe it was Don Arden, was managing Sabbath at the time, and they were pestering Geezer, like, hurry up, what are we going to do? And he's like, hey, I got my hands full. If Tony wants to go ahead, I'm out this time. So I thought that was very interesting because I had never, and I don't remember if that was in the Tony book. Again, I wanted to go back and reread it, but I always wondered like why, what was the split between the two? Because you're right, like you mentioned earlier, they always seem like the two guys that were the most solid in that band.
Yeah, they had their rocky times for sure.
Yes, and almost kind of seemed like they still do, according to Geezer's book.
Yeah, I don't know. But then, it's Geezer's birthday today, and Tony was wishing him a happy birthday on Facebook,
True.
and, all this kind of stuff. So, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
But, the one kind of interesting thing, and I guess for a Sabbath fans, kind of sad, is that on the final pages of the book, he basically says, that is it.
Yes.
I am not doing Sabbath anymore. I can't tour anymore. I just can't do it. And, in his eyes, the chapter is closed.
Yes. Although, did you, again, to bring up the Eddie Trunk interview, both Tony Iommi and Geezer Butler were interviewed separately on Eddie Trunk in the last 3 or 4 weeks. And there's that big show going on in October called Power Trip, where what is it? It's a 3 or 4 day festival.
Yeah, the one Ozzy just pulled out of. Yeah, yep.
Right. Ozzy just pulled out. Well, apparently, and I had heard this too, the original rumor was it was not supposed to be an Ozzy show. It was rumored to be a Black Sabbath show. And on the Tony interview, the Tony Iommi interview on Eddie Trunk, Tony confirmed it. He goes, yeah, we had the offer. He's like, but I turned it down because I felt, we didn't know what Ozzy's health situation was going to be. And then Eddie Trunk followed up by asking Geezer, and he's like, well, I never heard of it. So apparently the offer went to Tony first, or maybe Ozzy and Tony. And once Tony said no, it didn't even get to Geezer.
Right.
But it was interesting that there's still an offer, and Tony at least considered it. But that was his main thing, that he's like, well, I don't know what Ozzy's health is. And he goes, nothing was even discussed with Geezer and Bill. And I'm like, wait, wow, you were even considering Bill Ward?
Yeah. I would think at this point that ship has sailed, right?
I would think so too, but you're 100% right as far as touring or any major activity. Yep, it seems like, but that's the other thing too, Pete, not to make this a little longer, but there was that, and I don't think it was mentioned in the book, but when Tony Iommi and Geezer Butler did do that the British Olympics, and forgive me, anybody in the UK, I know that's not what it's really called, but the thing in Birmingham a couple of months back, where it was Ozzy and Tony, Geezer was asked. Maybe it was in the book, and I can't remember, but apparently Geezer had COVID, so he could not fly over. So
and they went and did it anyway. Yeah, they played just Paranoid, I think, right? They played.
Yeah, they did Paranoid, and I think they a piece of Iron Man.
Okay.
But yeah, it was Tommy Clufetos and Adam Wakeman played bass instead of the keys because they couldn't get Geezer because he was sick. But yeah, come to think of it, I think that was mentioned in the book. So, okay, even though they did a farewell show, there is still something, but I think anybody holding out for another tour or another record, yeah, we're never going to see that.
Yeah, it's a shame we can't get another.
But the book, I would absolutely recommend the book. It's a short book. It's an easy read, and yeah, if you're a Sabbath fan, I don't see why you wouldn't enjoy it. But he also doesn't seem, Pete, like he's doing anything else musically.
No, which is a shame, right? But maybe he just doesn't have to, because I think that's.
And I mean, listen.
I said it would be great if they would get together and make another record, right? They don't have to tour with it. Maybe play a festival date or two, and that's it, But yeah. I think that's what 13 was supposed to be.
I think so too.
The more the time goes on, the more it's probably not going to happen.
I mean, listen, he's 74 today.
Yeah.
I mean, Pete, if me and you make it to 74, would you want to go back out on? No way. I don't even want to work now, and I'm 50 something. I got to do 20 more years of this? Jesus. So, yeah, I don't blame him one bit for not wanting to deal with all that other shit again.
Yeah. Oh, well. But in the meantime, while we wait hopefully for the Bill Ward book, Into the Void.
Absolutely, yeah. Give it a shot for sure.
Yeah, give it a shot. It's enjoyable. Is it the greatest autobiography ever? No, but
Yeah.
it's, if you're a Sabbath fan, you're gonna want to read it. And it's a quick read, like it's under 300 pages. So you'll flip through this pretty quick. So cool. All right, there you have it. That's a review, guys. I don't usually rate books. 3.5 out of 5 star. I don't know.
Yeah, I was gonna say 7 out
It's
of
solid.
10.
Yeah, it's solid. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a good read. Like I said, if you like the Iommi book, you like the Ozzy book, yeah, you'll want to read this, right? There are other Black Sabbath books not written by one of the guys that I think are more entertaining than this is, but
Yeah.
this is still a good read and a must read. So go check it out. Visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, all together, all the damn time. For Chris Allen, and Pete Pardo, thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you real soon here on the channel with more stuff. I'll let a little cat out of the bag. Chris and I are plotting a monthly Black Sabbath themed show in the not too distant future. It's going to be all about Black Sabbath. We're kind of toying around with names here, and it's just going to be a quick, like, half-hour show once a month where we just talk Black Sabbath stuff. And the first episode will be all about like Black Sabbath bootlegs that are available. So that's gives you guys a little bit of insight on what's coming up, and it's just going to be strictly talking Sabbath and Sabbath related stuff. So stay tuned for that, and we'll see you later on. Take care, everybody.